Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric and our continuing series, Model Museum, where I review every single Sega Model 1, Model 2, and Model 3 game ever made that's not an arcade racing title, because I did that retrospective last year. And today we have a Model 2 original, not a Model 2A or Model 2B game, Desert Tank. And interestingly enough, this is sponsored by Martin Marietta, the defense contractor that supplies the US government, and a lot of the graphical chips in the Sega Model 2 were developed by them and shared with the US military. Fun little factoid that I always love mentioning when we talk about Model 2. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. If you don't do one of those two things, I'll come to your house with a tank. All jokes aside, this is the foundational hardware for Model 2. When Sega developed Model 1, they really wanted to get those textures in there and not just have flat shaded polygons. So a lot of what Model 2 was developed for at the start was to have great textures and enhanced 3D capabilities, which Desert Tank 100% has. Now if you've never seen an arcade cabinet for this game, it had massive controls to both steer the tank as well as deal with acceleration, gearing, and the elevation of your tank's cannon. Now those all transpose extremely well over to an analog controller. If you use something like an Xbox One controller, you can play this game no issue whatsoever. That does not, however, address the difficulty factor of this game. It is punishingly hard, and seeing the ending of any given stage is incredibly complicated and difficult to do. And I believe that's because there's only two stages in the game, easy and hard, and Sega definitely wanted you to come back and give it more credits. Because when you die, you don't just continue, it game overs and you start from the beginning. But when this game came out in 1994, it was mind-blowing, and this was one of the three original Model 2 games that was released to arcades before Sega started revising the hardware with the 2A and the 2B and further beyond that. And in 1994, when I saw this arcade cabinet on my arcade floor, my mind was blown. Not just because of the graphical prowess of the Model 2 hardware, but just how big the arcade cabinet truly was. You basically sat in a mock tank and the plastic shell was massive on it. You'd never really seen anything like that unless you saw some of the gigantic Daytona USA cabinets. But you will see I am already dead. It only took 2 minutes and 40 seconds, and that was from me showing you the entire level without doing any cuts. That is how hard Desert Tank is, and unfortunately that's one of the reasons it is not one of my favorite Sega Model 2 games of all time. I love it in execution, the graphics are great, and the gameplay hook is fun having to drive a tank around. My only issue with the game is that even on easy, there's projectiles coming from every single direction. You only have a set amount of life, and once that is over, you need to start the stage again from the beginning. This makes perfect sense on a gigantic amusement cabinet where it costs $2 to play. They want you to put another $2 in and try again. Unfortunately, if you're not in an arcade in a giant cabinet, not worried about making profit off of that, and a home experience, it is slightly lacking. Now the game looks incredible for its time and place. This is 1994. Don't forget, we were still playing the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis and Sega CD at our houses, and 3DO was just kind of popping up. The level of graphics that Desert Tank showed were something that no other platform at home or in arcades could do at that moment in time. The Sega Model 2 board was that powerful and was that impressive, and it makes total sense that Martin Marietta would want their name on a game and they'd use a military theme. I don't know if it was trying to promote the military. It's a very weak and tenuous connection, but it is an interesting one nonetheless. But you'll see all of these different projectiles here. Trying to hit everything at once is impossible. Honestly, the best thing you can do in some areas is to just tank right past it, pun very much intended, and try not to even bother, just try to get to the end of the level. But I will say the tank sounds, the soundtrack, all of the sound effects are quite good in Desert Tank, so go ahead and listen for 45 seconds. I'll come back and tell you more history about the Model 2 and the game itself. But enjoy. I mean, the soundtrack is totally appropriate for the game. It's got that deep drum sound and the bass going on, and at some point in time, somebody decided that's what more movies sounded like. They could have done anything, but the reason we know it as that is because someone made that choice. But I am curious who's ever played this game before in an original cabinet, so leave me a comment down below and tell me if you have seen this or not. I have not seen a desert tank cabinet for probably over a decade now. I'm starting to think that they probably just all broke because, like every arcade cabinet, it gets absolutely hammered on by players. And you will see here, we take another death. I did take a wrong turn there, bad memory, but it's just so hard to hit everything that is shooting at you. And that is the issue with Desert Tank, and it's the only thing that keeps this game from being one of those Hall of Fame first ballot good games to me. You will see here, if I take the same level again, if you just basically don't do what the game wants you to, which is to attack enemies and just go straight past them, you will carry more of your life bar with you, because the checkpoint system and the time extension is just getting from one section of the map to the other. And that's where I think this game has a slight design flaw. Actually playing it is to your detriment because you're going to take a lot of damage versus just trying to take some pot shots at these other tanks here, and rolling past everything else in front of you is going to be the more strategic way to actually get further in this game. And that definitely seems like a design flaw in my opinion, because you'll see here, if we just skirt this rock wall here, we might take a couple little machine gun hits, but our health armor bar there barely went down, and we're coming into this area with way more energy than we were when we actually tried to attack the enemies. That's never a good thing. If you can just avoid playing the game and run right past everything to get further, that means that maybe the difficulty is slightly unbalanced. But you leave me a comment down below and you tell me what you think about that opinion. But the thing about Desert Tank is it's such a foundational game in Sega's development history. The Model 2 was basically still new. We had Daytona USA, and Desert Tank came out shortly after that, like 6 to 8 months depending on what date you believe on the internet. And something like this on a screen in front of you was just stuff that most people had never seen before. 2D was still the name of the game for home consoles, and 3D was really relegated just to arcades and to very powerful computers, but even at that point in time, you were basically still on software renderer for any sort of polygons that your computer would show. But you will see here, because we just ran past everything, we got to this area with basically a lot more armor, but even then, we did take a hit there. You need to shoot that button on the wall to be able to pass through this particular canyon. And that's the one bummer. The game is better if you ignore what it's asking you to do, and it's a lot of fun to shoot all of these tanks and blow everything up and try to get that elevation on your cannon and arc those shots over. But when you spend time actually attacking the enemies, you leave yourself open to shots coming from everywhere, and this canyon is basically just a kill choke point. You're getting shot from every different direction, and if you're aiming at one enemy, you're getting hit by the other, which is probably an issue with actually driving a tank. You can't aim at everything all at once, you're not fast, and you're not that agile. And that's kind of just the issue with Desert Tank. It is such a great concept because who doesn't want to drive a tank around with tank controls? The issue is the execution. The game is just needlessly difficult, and that's not to say you can't learn it and you can't get better at it if you memorize every single enemy placement. There probably is a very particular line you can tank through to get to the end of each stage and see how it happens. The thing is though, that's not what we should be doing. We should be attacking all of the enemies, all the different mortar installations, all of the different machine gun nests, and having a good time. And I certainly do have a good time when I'm doing that. The problem is that actually facing the enemy head on is going to take so much of your armor away that it's really going to be difficult. If there are any armor ups in this game, I've never seen one. Leave me a comment down below and tell me if I'm just missing something, because I've blown up a lot of the different buildings and I never seem to be able to find any additional health in the game. And I am playing this on easy. I went into the test menu and articulated around, because trust me, on normal it's even harder, and on hard you're basically going to die within like the first 500 yards of the area. But it's still such an interesting game to look at from a development history, because this is where Sega gave us textures. Polygons no longer flat shaded, they finally had something on them, and that was just super impressive. And if you do see a Desert Tank cabinet somewhere, definitely throw some money into it. It might steal that money by killing you quickly, but it's a very rare cabinet and you 100% should check it out. And if you do know where there is one, leave me a comment down below because I would be curious. We're dead, game over, bye bye.
You rank as Sergeant.